Okay, so where the project first started and where it ended up was very different. So the first inception of the project was a lot more gritty. It was a lot more of a stylized, more of a gritty Western. So early on, we do just rip concepts from the internet that kind of helps us communicate to the team what we're trying to do before we spend a lot of limited precious resources on actual concepting and development. So my job as a art director is to put together a style guide for the team to easily understand. So we wanted to make sure that it was at first glance Western. So I came up with this notion of 70-30. So it had to be 70% Western, 30% fantastical sci-fi. And certainly that we wanted to have big open spaces and make sure that we had the archetypal classic environments for the Western setting. So this is the actual style guide that was given to the team. So apologies, I was very busy this week with a mocap shoot that ended yesterday. So I had to kind of put this together from the content that I had. So what's important on this slide is that the slinging that you will do in the game is the core feature of the game. And that started from us by looking at the controller. What is this device that's not a controller? It allows you to do something different. So part of that internal pitch process where the team comes up with concepts, which I glossed over, sorry about that. This was a concept that was, when we internalize concept, we tell the team, these are the parameters, this is the device we're going after, these are the controllers, this is what you can do, so come up with a cool concept. And the one that bubbled to the top was Arc Slinger, and the idea was that you use the controller like a badass gunslinger to flip it in the air and do all these things. And certainly you can't do that because you can't let go of the controller in your hand. So we came up a very mechanized way of using a buttons to hold the button and move in a certain direction, and then the animation replicates that. So this was, in the style guide, the most important visual element was the arcing. And in this universe, the idea was that the kinetic motion of the gun captures into energy, and you can see that. So that way the player recognizes exactly what they're doing. So these are the subtle cues that we as designers have to give to the player so they understand what they're doing. It is wish fulfillment. It is making the quote that Brooks had is absolutely spot on, because they're looking to embody this character, that what they could be. So in this case, the energy of the weapon is the most important thing, followed next by the weapon itself, and then the legibility of enemies on screen. And then the background's job is just to make sure that you can see the enemies, because this is an arcade shooter after all. Environments, a lot of mood boards from the various other concepts, and scale is a very important part of the concept. So we wanted to make, and VR scale is really effective, so I want to make sure that we had something that worked. And again, part of this notion of the gunslinging plus the visualization of what you get in the game. A lot of development of the style of the weapon. This is your hero asset, so we spent a lot of time on designing this and doing a lot of silhouette studies, and ultimately coming up with a weapon that feels like it's an old weapon, but it still has some 30% features to it that make sense visually. So it was very important to have that more consistent art style be inclusive. Final design, and yeah, so self-explanatory. A lot of explorations of shape of weapons as well. Was silhouette is a big part of what I do as an art director. The player has to quickly recognize what is the enemy class and what is the weapon class, so that's what we were designing. And originally, everything starts out with silhouette studies. We want to make sure that we can recognize what these characters are, and because it's 30% fantastic or sci-fi, 70% Western, we wanted to make sure that we can recognize some tribal aspects of the characters, and these were more the final concepts that started sticking. We wanted to have a cartoon quality because we ultimately got picked up by Google to have an exclusive title on Daydream, so we had to really make sure that it was able to function on the Daydream device. And this was not going to be a high-end PC. This was not going to be on the Vive, and actually it's going to be later this year. But we had to make sure that legibility was very clear. A lot of these consumer headsets are very primitive, and you have to have a lot of understanding of what exactly is the game mechanic, and that's what leads to a great game design and a great game experience, is the user not being told anything and for themselves understanding what they can do and what they can't do. So that's our job as game designers. So a lot of palettes and colors that were really important, and character designs that led to 3 different classes. So the big guy is our bomb thrower, and for sake of production, we had to consolidate. So this is really our 3 classes of characters that we build a rig for. We had to be very optimized with our time and production costs. So you have the bomb throwers that have the very same silhouette, but they're of different characters. You have the melee guy who runs up to you, and because he's the smallest guy, there's no such thing as a close-up in this medium. So the best way to replicate that is to have a character come up to you. So that's a case study in that is Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan, the beach scene. He had a lot of moments where the enemies come up to you, to the camera, to the other characters. And that's exactly the kind of thinking that you have to switch to when you're doing VR. Is if I want something to be more of a close-up, how can I bring it closer to me? And it has to fit within the fiction of the experience. Same thing with the tribal designs. We want to have robotic, anthropomorphic, or alien. Some of the early design that were rejected. And silhouette studies. Again, it's important to first be recognizable as a Western and have a fantastic element to it. So not only are we pushing the stylization because it's a cartoon, but also adding the additional layer to have a unique voice. So a whole bunch of elements that I'm just going to rip through, and I'm about halfway through my talk. So just a lot of fun explorations. Again, this is what I fall back on as a project lead, as a art director. This is the language I understand, and then understanding what works in VR. You have to, the combination of the experience. Originally, we were assuming that this was going to be a more procedural, roguelike experience, and we had to cut that out because we could not. That was going to be a rabbit hole that was going to sink the project. So early on, we decided that that's just something that wasn't going to work out. But we originally came up with these hexagonal footprints for the environment, so the artist can quickly generate them, and the game designers would have points where the enemies come out of. So that way, it was a modular procedural system. But because of the time frame of what we had, it was just not possible to do this. So. Again, just mundane items. What did they look like? You want to make sure it felt like a barrel, but it wasn't exactly a barrel. And concept art that starts to bring it all together. And different environments. So we were, given the time and budget we had, we cut it down to about 3 tile sets. So this is, again, similar kind of a approach. And now that the first levels were all about having the classic OK Corral feel, and then we wanted to go further into the environments and still make it feel like an American Western. And then you get to the end where now you're in the fantastic realm. So now we're in the 30%, and have fun with that, and we have the boss at the end. So a quick summary. It was 6 months of development we had to cut it down to. It ultimately is about a 60 to 90 minute experience. If you're totally awesome at the game, you can probably finish it in about 45 minutes. But if you are the average user, it'll probably take you about 90 minutes. And that also has a price point to it. Roughly, my estimate, and I think Brooks might be able to back this up, it's about the same price of a movie ticket, right? So entertainment should be about, $5, $7 an hour. So you can't really price it more than that. So that's where the monetization on these things become very challenging. And because this is exclusively on Daydream right now, it's not making us rich, that's for sure. Because there's not that many Daydreams out there, but there will be. So it's for Google to give us the production funding. It's because they need to seed the environments, they need to seed content, and majority of users are probably going to experience VR in the mobile devices first. If they're lucky, they'll go out to places where, like Brooks was talking about, and experience high-end. The most that you can do with this medium right now, the cutting edge, the bleeding edge of it. So 15 levels, about 4 looks. We have about 3 enemy classes and 9 variants. We had 1 boss. But the key thing is that what we had to cut out to make this production work, and that's based on years of doing game development. You shoot for the moon, but then at some point you have to kind of compromise and just decide, okay, just doing a flyby might be the best you can do. So in this case, we cut out to 1 player weapon. We cut out the multiple gangs, so we had just the 2 gangs that we ultimately ended up with. We also cut out the roguelike experience, which if you know what that is, a roguelike experience is when it's you one life basically from the beginning to end. So it resets to the beginning, and you have to continue again. And that was gave us blowback in the market. Apparently the more casual market has moved on from that, and so we decided to make a save system. And procedural gameplay was something that, even though we had a plan to achieve it, we knew that it was going to be very difficult to achieve in the 6 months that we had. And the trusting partner. Google was a fantastic partner to work with. They left us alone. And that was one of the most important things. And they were okay with these compromises, because what happens with untrusting partners is that they feel like they're not getting their money's worth, and they're actually jeopardizing the product by forcing you to go after the original vision. And once you have discovery during production, that you have to take logical compromises in order to achieve the highest possible quality and polish as much as you can. It's all about polishing the field, the mechanic, in order for the game to feel great. Otherwise, it's just going to be another bargain bin product, and it's not going to do anybody any good in the VR industry if the consumer picks it up and puts it down and they're done. Because for a lot of people, the demos that they get at Best Buy might be the only time that they experience it, and if that was a horrible experience, that's probably one consumer that's potentially not going to come back around for another year. So I raced through that, and I do have some videos of the game, but I think it's more important to answer any questions you guys might have. What's that? All right.
The sidekick. Woo! That was good. All right. Yeah! Pretty good shooting, Tater.
Seriously?
So that was the launch video, and it reminds me that we also had some great voice acting. There's actually a story in the game, and it tells you about what this world is about. Nolan North, who's one of the royalties of voice acting, is a friend of mine from my Uncharted days, and was able to give us some outstanding voices. And yeah, it's good quality production. And it's those really high-end productions that will allow this young medium to have a chance to actually succeed. Because right now we're in the trough of disillusionment with VR, and it's not making people rich immediately, but it's something that a lot of visionaries like Starbreeze, like Google, are putting enough money into it to make sure that we have quality products. And what scares me is having kind of garage bands and teams that are doing the best they can to put product out there that is inferior to what a proper game should feel like. And if we turn off consumers, then we're going to remain in the trough of disillusionment for a long time. So it's important to have the proper funding behind it, the proper time to polish, and be sensible about what it is you're doing. And these small budgets are really key to make sure that you can push that as far as you can. Yes?
Can I ask, just because you just touched on budget, what was the budget from, what was the total budget? How much of it came from Google? Did they offer any kind of in-kind support? Just to try and figure out how you put this together. Was it Google?
It was a high budget. I can't say how much, but it was 5 times what we had John Wick. So it was a good chunk of money, and it allowed us to really look at, the key thing was the time we had and make sure that we can build the characters in time. We strayed away from the realistic aspect of it because we knew that if we have to go onto the Daydream headset, we had to we would just sink a lot of time into making these high resolution characters look good, and the legibility can be pushed with stylized animation and really exaggerated shapes. So it was a smart decision, and Google allowed us to keep. They initially said they were the ones who really wanted roguelike experience, and after a month of going down that road, we said it's going to be a very big risk to the project, and we recommend we don't do it. And they were very sensible at it. They said, okay, that sounds good. And I've had other publishers who say absolutely not, you're going to stick to the original vision, and that actually is a bad sign for the project, because then you're off to a bad start. And a lot of times the game mechanics, if they feel great in the first month, then you know you're onto something. No other questions? Yes.
So you said it's coming out on 5 later.
Mhm.
Are you able to say anything about the deal with Google for exclusivity on Daydream?
It's a limited amount of time, but it's coming out this year, so you should figure it out. Yeah.
My first hearing about the Daydream, what can you tell us about it? What is it? When's it out?
Oh, Daydream's out. It's I have the Pixel device, and that's why I have a Pixel phone, is because that way I can demo it to friends and family. It's a great device. There's, I believe, in the last conversation with Google, there's going to be 9 Daydream possible mobile devices later this year. And at the I/O, they announced the portable headset, which we are supporting. So it's a great device, and there's only going to be more products that are able to have that. We've seen inside-out tracking that's coming. So we're going to get, so with Daydream, you got 3 degrees of freedom. So with places like Star VR and the Vive, you have the full 6 degrees of freedom where you're actually moving and there's parallaxing within the headset. It feels very natural. Right now, there's only 3 degrees of freedom on Daydream, where you do have a controller, which was a big feature innovation for that, which the Gear did not have it, but Gear 2 will have that. So you have 3 degrees of freedom, which means that you can rotate, but you can't translate. And the headset is locked to a singular perspective. With inside-out tracking that I've seen demos of, and they're on the horizon, you're able to have a Vive-like experience with your mobile device. So you can actually move, because it has sensors on the phone that allows you to move in space. So the kind of premium experiences are eventually going to come out into the mobile platform. No other questions? Yes.
So the hand controller, did that work out well on the?
Yeah, it's the experience actually feels much better with more premium controllers, because the original vision of slinging a gun like a badass gunslinger actually works really compellingly well. When you're doing this motion and the gun flips in that direction, you flip this and it flips up, and you flip this, and somebody in the press called it a Street Fighter of shooters. I'm like, hell yes, I'll take that, because it allows you to have different movements, and when you get into the deeper levels of the game, you're doing things that makes you feel like I'm actually very much in control. So that's what makes the game successful. No other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bob. That was excellent as well. Interesting experience and designs. Next up is Cory Strassburger. Excuse me. He's an Emmy Award winning visual effects artist, director, and co-founder of Kite and Lightning. So he'll take us on a tour of the creation of their new VR game, Babylon, Battle Royale. So this is a comedic party brawler, and I haven't had a chance to experience it yet, but I know that Cory was demoing it at VRLA and some other places, so let's get Cory up and have him present.
Thanks, Scott. I'm going to just do a really quick computer swap, because I'm a Mac guy and couldn't figure out the PC side of things.
All right.
Okay, so as Scott mentioned, my name's Cory Strassburger, and I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Kite and Lightning. And we do basically VR content creation. We're a very small studio. It was just the two of us for many, many years, and now we have doubled in size to 4 people. And so I'm going to kind of just take you guys through a quick background of me, and then I'll introduce you to the game Babylon that we've been working on. I'll kind of run you through the timeline of how we started, and we're basically in the middle of this game, and we'll kind of take a look at that. And then I'll kind of just jump through some of the concept, prototype, and production stages and some of the cool things that we learned along the way. I'm curious, how many people are in here are actually making VR right now? Okay, great. And what about want to make VR who aren't? Okay, great. So there's a lot of, towards the end, there's going to be a bit more technical stuff. Thinking that you guys being from VFX was kind of exciting to me to actually talk a little bit about bridging those two worlds and things that I've come across over the years. So this is my life on a timeline. In '95, I got into VFX and actually got to work with Tony Pace here at a really cool VFX house. Worked on like Minority Report, X-Files, Star Trek, bunch of cool TV shows, music videos. And I kind of bounced between a lot of 3D, a lot of compositing. And then in 2011, a buddy of mine, who now I've co-founded Kite Lightning with, showed me some AR experiments he was doing. He's an amazing programmer. And I kind of fell in love with the idea. And it was at a time when I was doing like a lot of photogrammetry, early photogrammetry, kind of like for some pseudo fashion photography stuff. And so we started kind of putting these two things together and making these really fun kind of life-size immersive VR experiences on iPads. And we liked it so much, we kind of decided to just start this company. And we were out pitching movie studios. Hey, we can make these cool kind of AR experiences for your films. And it wasn't long after that where Akrima shows up with a DK1 Oculus Rift off the Kickstarter, and we both kind of fell head over heels in love with the idea of making immersive experiences. And so we literally kind of dropped everything and spent a couple years, and we made 8 total VR experiences, starting at the top. A lot more experimental stuff. We were just kind of doing, made like this Batcave experience. We did this really cool train station experience where I was playing with, some old VFX tricks of doing stereoscopic billboards and dropping that in VR, which worked out pretty awesome, and it is a technique we used later for some of the professional VR jobs we did. And then we did a thing called Sense of Peso, which was this really cool kind of VR opera, and it takes you into this kind of the afterlife, and it was a piece that a lot of people resonated with, and it kind of put us on the map in the small early VR community. So then we went on to make we kind of ran out of money because we were kind of working off of our savings accounts at this point, and we started to go out and get some real VR jobs, and we ended up scoring a couple from GE, a really great client. We had a lot of freedom and had a lot of fun on those. We did a 360 experience for NBC The Voice, and then we did a thing for Lionsgate for a movie called Insurgent, very similar to what Brooke and those guys have done. We got to combine some live action stereo plates into, we got to go on set and capture some of the sets, and basically took you into like a slice of the film. We had a lot of fun, a lot of freedom. It was the early days. People were like, yeah, whatever you guys need, best, So we had a lot of fun doing that, but we basically had the plan to save up all the money that we made doing those things so that we could make our own VR content. And basically, after we finished our last project in 2015, probably around August, and after I convinced my girlfriend to quit her job of 11 years, the three of us moved to Europe with the idea of, we've got a pile of ideas, we've got enough money to last us a year. let's make something. And we knew we were going to make a game because we figured that was going to be the tip of the spear for the market. And we just thought, how hard can a game be to make, right? Neither one of us, me not even being a gamer. So in that time, that's when Babylon was born, and I'll kind of walk you through what this crazy world is. So I'm kind of missing my little notes here, but I'll just kind of wing it. So it's basically, you're an immortal baby, and you're teleported into this world of Babylon, and you're kind of battling for fortune and glory. And we basically thought, you got the power of VR, this beautiful blank canvas. Why not immortal babies? Just seem like the perfect fit. So at its core, it's basically like a multiplayer kind of party brawler game. It's going to have like a full live VR audience, so there'll be you can spectate as a baby and eventually be able to kind of influence the battles. And it's really kind of a big spectacle. So it started to become this idea where it's as fun to watch as it is to play, and it's also at its core, the game is all about self-expression. So there's a lot of customizations that'll happen, and it's all about sort of bringing out that inner wild child and using the power of VR to be able to do that. And so we started out with this core game idea, and it began to grow quite a bit. One of the problems when you don't have anybody stopping you. And so one of the things that we've always loved to do is more cinematic storytelling-based VR. And what we started to realize, or what I just started to infuse into this game and understand about it, is that there's so much more possible when you have this amazing game at the core, but then you start layering in more entertainment, more immersive experiences, gambling, and the whole social component starts to become really appealing. It's going to be more like a lifestyle game, like when we get done with it, kind of like a reality show that's centered around this game world. And so that's kind of the big vision, the big long-term vision. And this is basically the timeline that we're working with. So we're hoping to release the core part of the game at the end of the year. It'll be on Vive and Oculus, and then eventually PSVR. And the idea is that in order to kind of pull this off, we thought, let's get the game out there and make the game a great game to play. And then let's start layering in these episodics, which is basically the idea of, in traditional games, you're just releasing like more characters, more vehicles, more levels. But then we're going to start layering in more of the story, more of the immersive entertainment, things that are kind of these meta loops within the game. So you're kind of being fueled in the game to then go out and experience some of this other content, and then kind of come back. And as we grow those, we grow the live spectating, the gambling, the additional social spaces, and kind of build a platform for people to just express themselves, get crazy, get wild. You're going to have your babified kind of VoIP voice. You're going to be able to customize your taunts and how you kind of perform as you play. So it's a really kind of a fun world that we've created for ourselves to just experiment in and try and figure out how to pull off. And so let's take a look at the timeline. So once we arrived in Europe, this is basically from then right up until now. And we didn't know exactly what we were going to do, but we had a lot of ideas. And so basically we just started doing a lot of experimenting. And I'll kind of talk about the actual technical process that I went through that was very fruitful on that front. Started just doing a lot of ideating on potential for the world, the story that ultimately led to be the Immortal Babies, which is actually a really great one. I wish I had time to tell it. But it's so good that it kind of just really started to shape. Once we got into the prototype, the concept and the idea really just started forcing or shaping the experimenting we were doing. So we're just cutting out a bunch of stuff, because if it didn't sort of like inform us about the base concept that we were in love with, we just kind of chucked it out. And so we kind of quickly landed in a place where we just started prototyping the actual game. And probably the March 2016, we went to GDC. That's about the demo that you guys just watched, what we had then. So it was about 4 or 5 months of the two of us kind of figuring it out and getting it to that point. Then we were kind of running out of our year runway, and God bless Akrima, he went out and got us funding, and so we could kind of keep going. And then we basically came back here to LA in August, and then at that point we went into full production. We basically scrapped the prototype and started rebuilding everything from the ground up. And there's aspects to like multiplayer in VR and with networking and things like this that are a gargantuan challenge, especially for like a combat game where the sensitivity of like impact is so critical to the actual gameplay. So that it's been a long road trying to lay some of that scaffolding and that groundwork. And it literally it was like the following year GDC, we got another build working, and it almost looked just like the prototype we did a year before. So we spent, a year to get back to where we were, but with an actual, playable, workable, networkable game, and obviously a lot more than that. But so then we've showed it at GDC, at VRLA, and then we showed it at the Tribeca Film Festival. We're kind of at this very I'd say from a time standpoint, getting to have this game come out at the end of the year is going to be a little bit of a trick for us. But that's basically the path that we're on. And so what I was going to do was kind of just walk you through the concept, the prototype, and the production, and just kind of highlight some stuff. This is probably a little bit more technical. The concept's simple. The best thing that actually we ever did, and the thing I can't, I'll have with me forever, and I'll apply it to everything I do from now on. And that is the getting away factor for us. It wasn't just that Europe was awesome. It was that, we were like doing lots of demos and we're on phone calls and meetings, and it was just a lot of chaos at that point. And getting away, and to be able to not check emails for weeks at a time, sometimes even a month before I even open my mail program, no phone calls, no meetings, like the space that happened there for me creatively was unbelievable. And it really, I think, the stuff that just, you hit a place where this stuff just starts coming out, and it's all quality stuff. And the harmony of everything we were doing was just really beautiful, and something that I hope to try and do. And wherever you can, I really highly recommend trying to find that contiguous space early on when you're experimenting and ideating on things. So for the early prototype, one of the really fun and cool things that helped dramatically was that I kind of went on the Unity asset store, and I grabbed a bunch of assets, just tons of whatever, anything that was related to our ideas. So I got some vehicles, some weapons, some environments, put them all into a big scene, and then I just kind of started picking and pulling from stuff and basically just mocking up ideas. And I ended up learning a lot about just spatiality in VR and things I'll talk about later, and discovering things about scale and making little mini games. We had all kinds of crazy like games we'd make in a couple days with like throwing things and like running games on these things. And while that was happening, I was also kind of thinking about the concept, the idea, and the story, which led to the baby world. And again, like I was saying before, those two things in harmony, back and from pencil and paper, trying out an idea, pencil and paper, and then suddenly this thing kind of cascaded into where we landed with the idea. And it was basically based on those two things kind of running in parallel. The other thing that we did a lot back then and still do a lot now is prevising in Maya, because it's really fast, and a lot of what we've been building is with our stage mechanism is very complex. And we've these ideas of the rag zones, which I'll show you a few of the previses, which is kind of hard for me to explain. And at the same time, to be able to work through some of the problems that we'd have in Maya just saved a lot of time compared to like trying to figure this out in the Unreal Engine. But this is just some really basic movements and how we were going to kind of do this clipping plane sort of arena and be able to maybe cut to scenes where the baby lands in. And this is some of just the early math that helped me figure out how we were going to actually translate that into Unreal and also, again, communicate to everybody what we were up for.